gravity just makes things a little easier. And so it was a combination of being in a new environment that's 1/6 gravity, but also having a pressure suit, which is a stiff, cumbersome sort of thing, being with some of that stiffness and cumbersomeness being relieved a little bit, so they kind of counterbalanced each other. In other words, we had practiced doing all that so much. Every maneuver, our checklist, we had gone it over and over and over, practiced the same things we were to do on the moon. It was just in a new environment. The pressure suit was a little, and the environment was a little stiffer, but the 1/6 gravity made it a little easier, so they kind of compensated each other. And we were practiced enough that we went right through it, hopefully without too much encumbrance.
Okay, next.
My question is actually the same one was also asked to Mr. Duke when he was here. There's only 12 people that have been lifting off in a launch vehicle from another spacecraft than the Earth, the Moon. And I was wondering how you experienced the lift off from the Moon, and then if you could explain a bit about the technical aspects of it and your personal, let's say, emotional aspects, like if it is like a roller coaster or whatever.
Well, again, I think we'd had enough experience for that time, enough stories of liftoff. We'd watched it enough times. It was just a feeling of the liftoff with the pressure behind it. We'd flown enough aircraft and done high G turns that we knew what gravitation, high acceleration felt like in the craft. There wasn't any great surprises that we knew. It was just more of the same, more of what we had really practiced all along. And so to answer your question, was there any great surprises? No, there was not.
Okay. What has been your life after the Apollo mission? I mean, you reached probably the greatest achievement that a pilot can dream about. What has been your goals after?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite understanding what your question is.
What has been your goals after the Apollo mission?
My goals.
Yeah, your goals.
Well, you saw in my presentation that I described the epiphany that I had in space. Now, what I didn't say in the presentation, some of you may have heard of the work of Dr. Joseph B. Ryan at Duke University in mysticism and parapsychology, that I was quite familiar with his work. And I had set up with some physicist friends of mine, it wasn't just my stuff, some physicist friends of mine, a psychic experiment in space that I did twice going out and twice coming back. And we got as good results at 200,000 miles out in space as Dr. Ryan got in one room to the next room in Duke University in California, rather in North Carolina. So that had me all psyched up in order to do some more work in this area. And as was a result of my setting up my foundation later after the flight, called the Institute of Noetic Sciences in California, to investigate more thoroughly what is the nature of consciousness. So bear with me a minute while I set the stage for that for you. 400 years ago, over 400 years ago, closer to 500 years ago, René Descartes, a French thinker, writer, mathematician, wrote a paper that said body, mind, physicality, spirituality are different realms of reality that don't interact. Now that served a noble purpose 500 years ago. It got the Spanish Inquisition off the backs of the intellectuals in Europe, so they could bring them at the stake for disagreeing with the church on certain issues. But as a result of that, well, that was provided they stayed away from mind and consciousness as proper subject matter. So science arose in those periods thanks to Newton and the great scientists of that period. And for 400 years, science arose without any looking at mind and consciousness as a proper subject. Until the end of the 19th century, when Einstein, Max Planck, and the greats of that period started playing with and discovering what we would now call quantum physics. And by the 1920s, quantum physics was pretty well understood, but not completely. It's taken us a whole century the 20th century to really bring this into the power and understand that our psychic or intuitive experiences are of the quantum world and have to be dealt with in the quantum world. And so what we have is that consciousness and mind have only really been properly started to be described in the latter part of the 20th century. And let me say it this way. We say in the English language, at least, that our intuition is our sixth sense, but it really should be called our first sense, because the quantum world is more fundamental than our sensory world. That we've had them reversed thanks to Descartes and our refusal to accept that innovation. And it was once we had the quantum world starting to get it under control, we realized that Descartes was wrong 500 years ago. But it's taken us all of the 20th century to start to correct that mistake and start to use our intuitive and understand our intuitive capabilities and consciousness a little bit in a better way. We still have a ways to go, by the way, but nevertheless, that was the fundamental benefit of that work, is discovering quantum mechanics and realizing its power in our universe. And let me say it this way to nail it down a little bit. From the Newtonian world, the Newtonian physics world, we have said that matter and energy are the two fundamental principles of nature. No, we have to add, now that we understand it a little better, that matter, energy, and awareness is a bottom of consciousness, that matter, energy, and consciousness are the three fundamental properties of nature. And we're just now beginning to accept that in the scientific world. Okay, let's go on to another thing.